E aí, tá gostando da playlist Corra Numa Boa? Ela é um oferecimento do Itaú Uniclass para ser a trilha sonora dos seus treinos e te ajudar a seguir em frente. Pois na vida e na corrida, cada passo é uma conquista e merece ser celebrado. Itaú Uniclass, para você chegar lá.
All-star closer Kenley Jansen, we have a question.
What's the best podcast of all time? Baseball isn't boring, baby.
I'm Rob Bradford, and every single day I'm sitting down with the biggest names to show you this great game is the greatest game. It's my podcast. It's my passion. It's a cause I started more than 2 years ago and is now the most prolific national daily baseball pod there is. Another fact. So jump aboard the BIB Express. Follow and listen to Baseball Isn't Boring, presented by Wasabi Hot Cloud Storage on the free Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's time. Time to get in the zone. Time to get in the zone with the 49ers Web Zone. This is the No Huddle Podcast with Al and Brian.
What's up, faithful? You're listening to another episode of the 49ers Web Zone No Huddle Podcast, a part of the Odyssey Network. I'm Brian Renick. He's Al Sacco. It's the 2024 offseason. So this episode is going to be about Brandon Aiyuk. Brandon Aiyuk has officially requested a trade from the San Francisco 49ers, and we are here to break it down and talk about it. Al, I think I'm not going to say we're on different sides. You and I talked about this briefly before we came on air, but I have seen you on Twitter kind of playing devil's advocate about kind of maybe where the disconnect might be between the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk. And I am firmly in the camp that Brandon Aiyuk should get broken off something handsomely because he has earned it and deserves it. But I kind of want to see where you're at when it comes to where do you think maybe the 49ers are hesitant to get to the level that Aiyuk wants them to get to?
Well, I think with this trade request, first of all, to me, it's just Aiyuk trying to light a fire under their ass, right? Camp is around the corner. He doesn't want to get fined, although the fines are a joke to me because they're just going to get forgiven anyway when he signs his new deal. They're not going to hold him accountable to $50,000 a day or whatever it is. But I also don't think he's coming to camp. So he's trying to get something done. He's trying to spur some action. He thinks he should get paid like one of these top guys, $30 million a year, however much guaranteed. And I think I know you think they should resign him, and I think they should resign him too. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. Where I'm coming from is just as I'm trying to look at this situation in a devil's advocate kind of way. Where are the Niners coming from? Where's he coming from? And the way that I think the 49ers see Brandon Aiyuk, and this is just me, I'm just speculating, they think, yeah, you're a really good receiver. We think you're a 1A type, terrific wide receiver, but we do not think you're one of the top 1 to 2 elite guys at the position, or maybe even top 5 at the position where we're going to pay you $30+ million a year. Now you say, well, they have taken care of their players before. Yeah, they do have a pretty good track record with that. But when you look at some of these contracts that they've done, and mind you, all these contracts have been done July 21st or later, so we're still not there yet. But Fred Warner, top 1 or 2 linebacker in the league. George Kittle, top 1 or 2 tight end in the league. Nick Bosa, coming off a defensive player of the year, top 1 or 2 defensive end in the league. Even Deebo Samuel, while he's not a top 1 or 2 receiver, he was kind of a 1 of 1. What he did, nobody else really did that. And he had put the offense on his back at that time. They didn't have him McCaffrey then. Aiyuk hadn't broken out then. He was kind of a 1 of 1. Now, Aiyuk's not in that situation. Is he terrific? Do they want to have him back? Yeah. But I believe they're saying, we love you a lot, and we're going to give you 26 million reasons a year to show you how much we love you. But we don't love you at 30 million. We still got to sign other guys. We still have to sign Ward and Greenlaw and Demo, and Purdy needs a new contract. So you got to come and meet us. I don't know if it's going to be halfway or you just have to come down to our offer, but I believe that's where they're coming from. And we'll go back. I know you have some numbers and I have some numbers, and we'll talk about reasons why on both ends.
Yeah. One of the things that I think is that a lot of people don't think about when it comes to Brandon Aiyuk is, and I think you've said it in a previous episode, he's really coming off his best season as a 49er. and it's been one season, right?
One elite year.
One elite year. But if you look at Deebo Samuel, that he was coming off one elite year as well. If you look at, if you look at Deebo Samuel's career as a 49er, his rookie year, 802 yards receiving, 3 touchdowns. 2020, 391 yards, 1 touchdown. 2021, 1,405 yards, 6 touchdowns. 2022, 632 yards. And then 2023, 892 yards. Now, again, we also know Deebo more than just a receiver, right? They do put him in the backfield. And if you look at even rushing, 2019, he had 3 rushing touchdowns. 2020, he had none. 2021, he had those 8 rushing touchdowns, 21 first downs on the ground. He was a do-it-all, but it was one season, and they broke him off. And they broke him off with a fair contract, a contract that matched the market. And the biggest problem that I have is the way that the 49ers go about negotiating extensions with their stars. Everybody else in the league is getting these extensions done early in the offseason, or even for some of these players like a Devontae Smith, even a Jalen Waddle, maybe even a year early, right? You're coming off year 3 instead of year 4. And so they are negotiating deals. And here's the thing. If you would have come to Brandon Aiyuk, and this was I had said something on Twitter about just really not liking the way that the 49ers handle their contract extension, specifically with their stars. They wait too long. They wait way too long. And I don't understand why. Nobody's ever asked them why. We've never been given a reason why they do it the way that they do, but it costs them money in the end. Because here's the situation. If you would have come to Brandon Aiyuk in April and you would have said, look, we want to give you 4 years, $110 million, right? That's $27.5 million APY. If you would have come to him in April with that offer, there's no way he would have said no to that offer, because that would have put him 3rd in the NFL behind only Tyreek and Devontae Adams in terms of APY. Now, he would have been passed, and he would have known more than likely that he would have been passed, but you avoid the Amon-Ra St. Brown contract. You avoid the A.J. Brown contract. You don't worry about the Justin Jefferson contract. That's an outlier. It was always going to be an outlier. But you even avoid the Jalen Waddle contracts, right? The Devontae Smith contract, where you're like, he's way better than Devontae Smith. Devontae Smith's getting $25 million a year. Everything that we've heard, all the numbers that we've heard, and I haven't heard anything different, is that the APY on the deal that the 49ers have on the table for Brandon Aiyuk is $26 million a year.
That's right.
That is not equivalent to his status in the league in terms of where he is as a wide receiver. Because here's the thing. You look at Matt Harmon, who we're trying to get on the show. I would love to have him. Hopefully we can make it happen. But Matt Harmon runs a website called Reception Perception, and his whole analysis just revolves around the wide receivers and tight ends, the pass catchers. And Brandon Aiyuk in 2023 had a success rate of 60% or above in every single route that he ran, type of route that he ran. Sorry, not every route, every type of route that he ran in 2023, which is impressive in and of itself. And then you look at his success rate. Now, again, success rate meaning you ran a route and you were open. Doesn't mean that the ball went to you. Doesn't mean that you made a catch. It just meant that you were open. If the ball was thrown to you, you would have been open. He had a 78.7% success rate against man, which is the 96th percentile. He had an 85.4% success rate versus zone, which is the 91st percentile. And he had an 83.6% success rate versus press man coverage, which is 97th percentile. For all intents and purposes, Brandon Aiyuk is an elite wide receiver in this league. And all he's asking is to be paid commensurate with these other guys that some of them arguably aren't as effective as Brandon Aiyuk. Now, devil's advocate here, right? A lot of those wide receivers play in offenses that throw the ball more, right?
Yeah, and that would be my counterpoint to a lot of what you're saying from where the Niners are coming from.
But that is not Brandon Ayuk's fault. Brandon Ayuk's, if it were up to Brandon Aiyuk, they probably would throw the ball more, right? Mm-hmm. So, like, I understand negotiating and being like, look, we don't throw the ball a lot. And it's like, well, then throw the ball more, right? Like, what do we, I'm not going to take less money because you guys don't want to throw the ball as much. I deserve to be paid as much as I can get paid. And if I was on the open market, here's the deals that I would be getting. And I know that because these are the deals that are being handed out. So
what I would say to that if I were the Niners is, okay, here's our offer. Go shop it. Go see what you can get.
But here's the problem is, but they have to
find that and get trade compensation for it.
Sure. And that's the thing. That's where it's like, that's where this trade request means nothing. If we're being perfectly honest, it means nothing. And it means nothing because we already know the 49ers aren't going to trade him. They're not. We know that. There's no chance that it's going to happen because they've already been open to hearing offers and none of them were sufficient for them to be like, okay, we'll do that. So even if he went to the Steelers and was like, hey, would you give me this offer? And the Steelers are like, for sure. Like, great. And then they come back to the 49ers and be like, the Steelers will give me this offer and be like, okay, well, we want a first and second round pick for you. And the Steelers are like, well, we're not going to do that.
Right.
Because
we'll give
that's
you
not the same. Yeah, that's not the same. Now you're paying Brandon Aiyuk and you're giving up future assets. That's why, like, to go to other teams, to tell him go to other teams and find someone who's willing to pay you. I think he could find 4 or 5 teams that would be willing to pay him that. It's pay him that plus the compensation. That doesn't mean that he's not worth it. It just means that that is an unrealistic expectation on the 49ers part. But that's my point is you are, as the 49ers, you are negotiating against the market because these players know what their market is. And the market is set by these deals that get signed early in the offseason. If you would have just come with your best offer, not the offer that you want, but your best offer early in the offseason, you probably would have ended this already.
It's the most anticipated WNBA season in history.
So you know what that means.
Court is back in session with Queens of the Court, a WNBA podcast.
I'm your girl, Cheryl Swoops.
And I'm Jordan Robinson. All WNBA season long, we'll bring you interviews with star athletes, analysis on your favorite teams,
and lots of hot takes.
Order in the court.
Follow and listen to Queens of the Court, free on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Well, Michael Pittman Jr. signed in March. He signed a 3-year, $70 million contract extension with $46 million guaranteed. And I should have gotten more than Pittman. But again, if they just go based on that and just beat Pittman by $10 million or whatever it is, you got a bargain all of a sudden.
Right.
And I think, too, we mentioned Debo. We do have to say with Debo as well, the Niners were preparing to run with Trey Lance at that point. And we're going to have a quarterback on a rookie contract. Yeah. So they might have been a little bit more willing to throw money around. Whereas right now they have to pay Purdy. And the Bosa contract is gigantic. That also has to be thrown out there. Mm-hmm. So with those 2 contracts, you may not be able to pay a receiver $30 million. But you brought up 2. So you brought up, we don't throw as much. And again, remember anybody listening to this, I'm playing devil's advocate from the Niners side. That is my role in this podcast right now. You want $30 million a year. You want Amon-Ra St. Brown money. And now a number of people have told me on social media, Al, I think Ayuk's better than St. Brown. Great. Maybe he is. But St. Brown, since he's been in the league, he's been targeted 119 times his rookie year, 146 times in 16 games in 2022, and 164 times last year. He's had 90, 106, and 119 catches. Aiyuk was 36th and 28th in targets the last 2 years. CeeDee Lamb is about to get a big contract. CeeDee Lamb had 181 targets. You had 75 receptions. You know what I mean? Like, if you add your receptions onto your targets, you still don't have the amount of targets that CeeDee Lamb did. Tyreek Hill, you're not in there, but just listen to these targets, Brian, last year. CeeDee Lamb 181, Devontae Adams 175. Although Devontae Adams is a cautionary tale, and be careful what you wish for, right? Because I don't think he's happy in Oakland or wherever the hell they are, Las Vegas, wherever the Raiders play these days. Tyreek Hill 171, Garrett Wilson 168, St. Brown 164, Diggs $160, Puka Nacua $160, AJ Brown 158, Pittman, who we just mentioned, 156. The list goes on and on and on of all these guys who were targeted more than Aiyuk. George Pickens 106, Trey McBride 106, Jacoby Myers had more targets than Brandon Aiyuk, right? So all these guys, David Njoku, Tyler Lockett, Calvin, I can just go on and on because he was 36. So there's 35 names that I can mention, right? So again, if you're the Niners, you're saying, dude, we love you, but we don't throw like that. And you may also be thinking, if you're the 49ers, we just drafted a guy we really like. We're better off keeping you on this 50-year option. And if he is what we think he is, and they obviously think he's good because they drafted him in the first round, we'll ride with him and ride. It's not a bad thing to keep Deebo Samuel around. We'll go with that, and we'll tag you and trade you next year. And Brian, we always talk about when the lights are the brightest, right? What do guys do? We compliment Eric Armstead for that. And I just looked this up today just because I was curious. Again, this isn't a knock because there are a lot of factors that go into playoff. Jimmy Garoppolo is a factor, right? They don't make the Super Bowl without Aiyuk making that incredible catch.
Right.
He's made plays. I'm not saying he hasn't. But I was just like, what has he done in the playoffs? I'm just curious. And I looked it up today. He's played 9 playoff games with the 49ers. He's caught 24 of his 45 targets. That's only 53.3%. 393 yards and 1 touchdown. That's 2.7 receptions a game and 46.3 yards per game. But Al, he played all those games with Jimmy Garoppolo. I hear you. In the 5 games he played with Purdy, I'm not counting the NFC Championship game when Purdy got hurt.
Right.
14 catches on 29 targets. That's 48% for 248 yards. He has 2.9 catches and 49.6 yards in those playoff games. So again, if I'm the Niners and I'm coming in a negotiation and he's saying I'm elite, this thing, and the other thing, I'm saying, well, wait a minute. Yeah, you had elite numbers this year, but in the postseason, dude, you're catching 3 balls a game. You know, Deebo has had games where he's been 6 catches for 122 yards, or a big game here, a big game there. Juwan Jennings caught more than all you guys last year in the playoffs. Look at the bargain we're getting him on. And he can be a bigger part of the offense. So again, if you're coming as a devil's advocate from the Niners side, there are things that they can stand on to say, bro, we love you, but pump the brakes a little bit.
I think the other thing that that you have to take into account when you think about this negotiation is, we've talked about it a lot. I think we probably thought it last year and it wasn't, but this is the last ride. This year is the last ride. Brock Purdy has to, they have to pay Brock Purdy after this season. There's an out in Deebo's contract after this season. Trent Williams is going to be another year older. George Kittle's going to be another year older, right? Like this is the last hurrah of this iteration of the San Francisco 49ers. And you're quibbling with a guy that makes you better and that makes you a Super Bowl contender over, arguably probably $2 to $4 million in annual yearly salary, and maybe, I don't know, 10 to 15 million in guaranteed money. It seems a little bit reckless and careless to be quibbling over something like that when you know that this is the last hurrah. This is the season where you got to win the Super Bowl, because this team is not going to be what it is right now starting next year. And to me, an extra $4 million a season on a contract, or an extra 10 to 15 million in guaranteed money over the life of a contract, a Super Bowl victory is worth more than that to me. If I'm John Lynch, if I'm Jed York, right? And because here's the thing, because
next year, someone just put in the chat, it's a good point. Juwan Jennings is making $4 million. So what if that causes you to not have some of these role players that have helped you so much? We just mentioned Jennings had the most catches in the postseason last year. We got Demo, we got to sign. We got Travis Ward, we have to sign. There was a ESPN poll that had Dre Greenlaw as the 9th best linebacker in the NFL, and we saw what happened when he wasn't on the field in the Super Bowl last year. You have to re-sign him, re-sign Hufanga. So what if, it may help. Aiyuk's a happy camper this year, right? He's probably on the team anyway this year, regardless. But is your Super Bowl window still open if you don't have Lenore? If you got to get rid of Ward, if you don't have some of these guys, can they sign all those players? At some point, you get too top heavy. You still need the role players, right? Dallas can have Dak, Micah, and Lamb if they want to, but everybody around them is. That's why those contracts are so hard to get done for those three. So that's my thing with it too. Like you have to, if you believe in Purdy, like they believe in Purdy, and he's your franchise quarterback, I would rather, again, devil's advocate, have this full kind of squad around him, a good defense, these legit corners, a Juwan Jennings, a Pearsall who we believe in, and we'll ride with Debo again, still having Kittle and McCaffrey rather than dump all this money on this receiver and then we have to cut corners other places.
Yeah. I mean, and that's, and maybe that is the calculus, but if it comes down to it and this extension doesn't get done and Aiyuk misses camp because of it, your offense is not as good. It's just not. You're going to rely on a rookie. Yeah, rookies
100%.
Rookies notoriously have very poor rookie seasons at receiver for this team. And now all of a sudden you've got a disgruntled Brandon Aiyuk who has missed all of camp. And now you're what? I mean, think about it this way. You know, somebody pointed out on Twitter the dates that Debo signed, that Kittle signed, and that Bosa signed. And when you look at all those dates, right, it's July 31st, August 1st, and then September, whatever, right? If you go back and you look at the production of those three players the season after they signed their extension, it's one of their worst careers as a 49er. It was Debo Samuel's worst season since his rookie year.
Came in out of shape, admittedly. Yep.
Exactly. It was Kittle got injured that year and only played like 7 games. And then Bosa had his worst season since his rookie year.
And admitted it affected him.
Exactly. And so this is what I mean about I don't agree with the way that they go about these contract extensions, because it's their stars that they do it with, and it's those stars that they have to ride if they want to win a Super Bowl. And those stars don't perform as well after these prolonged, contentious negotiations, right? Either A, because they're disgruntled, or B, because they missed training camp. And that's incredibly important for these players. Nick Bosa is one of the most in shape human specimens I've ever seen in my life. When he came back from his negotiations, he probably had 2% body fat. Like, it's not that they're not doing what they need to do, but training camp is important to get into football shape. And that's what they're playing with fire when they do it this way. Because like I said, you look at those 3 players that are the 3 players that signed the latest for these contract extensions, and they all had shitty years the following year compared to what they had produced in years past. That to me is the biggest fear that I have, is that Brandon Aiyuk is going to be a 49er in 2024. I'm not saying that he's not. He will be, because the 49ers, regardless of this trade request, have all the leverage. They have a 5th-year option that they've already enacted, and they even have 2 years of franchise tags if they want, and even Adam Schefter came out yesterday and said the 49ers are using the franchise tag as a weapon in these negotiations, basically saying like, listen, I know this is what you want. Here's what we're offering. Don't forget, we've got the tag for the next 2 years. So regardless of what you want and what your desires are, here's what we're offering. It just feels, I don't know. I've never had to negotiate a contract before, so I can't, and I'm not a world-class athlete, but it just seems like pissing off your best players is not not the best policy, I would think.
You know what's funny about that? And Aaron said in the chat, Warner was still the best in the league after signing his. Yeah, but Warner signed on like July 21st.
Yeah, he didn't miss camp
that year. Yeah. It's interesting to me. So a couple points. The first is I spent all last offseason. I hated the way the Niners handled the quarterback stuff last year. I thought it was dysfunctional. I thought it was crazy. And you know what? It didn't matter at all. It just doesn't matter because they have a good locker room. And they have all these great players, and Shanahan's a really good coach, and they have a good front office. So they do things a little dysfunctional sometimes. Yeah. Has it mattered? Not yet. Not at all. So that's why I'm kind of like, like whether I agree with it or not, like until it affects them on the field, I'm kind of like, And I've been critical of them in the past, been very critical of them in the past. You know, it's to the point where it's cost me with the team a little bit. So, but you know, in ways that still sting to this day. But what's going to happen this year if Aiyuk does play on this 5th-year option, which it looks like that's where we're headed, and I think they would tag him and trade him. That would be my prediction of what would happen. But Mike Silver said it best: it's Hunger Games. You got Debo, who's kind of playing for his future, or maybe a second contract, either the Niners or another team. You have Aiyuk in this 5th-year option, and then you have Pearsall, who's this number 1 pick coming in and trying to find his way. You have Juwan Jennings, who's only here for a couple of years. Can he step up and be, you know, a number 2 or play a bigger role?
No.
So all of a sudden, Aiyuk could put himself in a position where it's like, all right, yeah, man, you had a good year again. You caught 70 balls. We threw the ball to you 110 times. But we have somebody who can slide in. Ricky Pearsall can slide in and get 110 targets next year. We're good, man. We're going to tag you and trade you. So he could blow up and have a gigantic season. And at that point, they'd probably still tag him and trade him. Because then if you say he catches 120 balls and 15 touchdowns this year, then maybe you're in the jet. Then they can't afford it. Exactly. So either way, you're probably headed towards a tag and a trade. Just kind of is what it is. I feel like that's kind of where they are right now. And I agree with you. We're like, you may brought up a good point on a show, however long ago it was, when you were like, if I'm a receiver and I'm coming here and I do the dirty work like you want me to, and I block and I go over the middle and I buy in and I'm okay with only 105 targets and I produce at a better clip than anybody else in the league with those 105 targets, and I'm not going to get paid. What the hell is this?
Right.
And you're right. And it doesn't send a good message. But again, like I just said with the Niners, if they keep winning the way they're winning, I don't know that it matters. If they replace Pearsall or Aiyuk with Pearsall, did they treat Aiyuk well? Maybe not. But if they just replace him with Pearsall and things keep humming for the next 5 years, is anybody going to give a shit? Probably not. So it's kind of a double-edged sword in that way. Look at what they did. Look at how they treated Garoppolo, who they really didn't treat very well, despite what people think of Garoppolo. Yeah. And the Trey Lance stuff, too, it was comical. Like with the bringing Sam, and it didn't matter. None of it mattered because they found Brock Purdy. Nobody right now, if you're talking about the 49ers quarterback situation, no one gives a shit about Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance because we have Brock Purdy. Nobody cares. It's a footnote. The worst trade in the history of football is a footnote, is a gloss over right now. Maybe in 2 years, if the team falls apart, it won't be. But right now, it's like, oh, remember they traded 95 first-round picks for Trey Lance? Remember that? Whereas other teams, it would be like everybody's fired. It's insane. It's insane that this team, they are a Teflon organization the last 5 years or whatever it's been. It's nuts, Brian. It's nuts.
I agree with you, but do you also feel like some of that is just dumbass luck? And eventually that's going to run out.
Some of it is.
Yeah, that's going to run out. And that's my biggest concern is eventually, like a lot of it is Kyle Shanahan is a tremendous head coach, like full stop.
Yeah.
That is part of
and his staff is tremendous. He knows how to fill staff.
And even the front office is really good. There are certain areas where they're not. I think they have a blind spot for the offensive line. We've talked about that a lot.
Yeah,
it is what it is. Right. But again, as much as we continue to point these things out, all they continue to do is win. So ultimately, like it's hard to be critical when they just keep winning. Like I get it. Mm-hmm. And then it just sounds like sour grapes. And I understand that. And I don't want it to sound that way. But I also think that even in the midst of tremendous success, there are certain things that you can look at and go, here's something that I could point to, be like, is that sustainable? And I don't know that this luck that they've had where like they can make all of these really horrendous personnel decisions, things like that, and just get through it without feeling like it mattered at all. Like there's to a certain extent, like I said, it feels lucky to me, not more than anything, but there is a certain level of luck involved in it. And my concern is that will eventually run out. But to me, again, more than anything, I just need to see them lift that 6th Lombardi. And this coming season feels like probably their best chance. Well, we feel like last season was their best chance, but moving forward, right? Again, this is their last true chance, I would say, within the next 2 to 3 years, because they're going to have to retool, right?
Yeah,
once they pay Purdy, right? The next window, who knows, right? It could be, I mean, shit, the Rams tore it down and only missed the playoffs for one season, and we're back in the playoffs the following season. And that had a lot to do with Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford. Well, the 49ers have their own Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford, they think, in Kyle Shanahan and Brock Purdy. So as long as you've got the head coach and the quarterback, it seems like you can retool on the fly and still be pretty successful. So we're going to have to see what that looks like. But it just scares me to go into this season where your best wide receiver, and bar none, I mean, regardless of how good of a football player Debo is, Brandon Aiyuk is their best wide receiver. And to have him go into the season disgruntled and to have him miss some, most, all, whatever of training camp, it just seems like that's going to be difficult for this offense to overcome. And we've already talked about how it's the offense that's going to have to carry this team now, because we've got quite a few questions on the defensive side. And so to hamstring the offense, which is going to be what carries you, by having, again, a disgruntled wide receiver or a number one wide receiver who has missed some, most, or all of training camp, it's just not ideal, right? It's not ideal. Now, can they overcome it? Probably. I mean, if we're being perfectly honest, they have already. They've shown that they can overcome some of these things, but I don't know. It just scares me.
You know what's funny? You mentioned pulling it out of their ass. I remember 2021, which is the year Debo put on the Superman cape, and they were 3-5. I thought that entire season was pulled out of their ass. It was like they just keep pulling games 100%. Out of their ass, and they were a dropped interception away from the Super Bowl and maybe pulling a championship out of their ass. Yeah. So I was like, all right, going forward, if Lance isn't that dude, they're in a lot of trouble, because they're winning playoff games for 150 yards. Like, it's just, I'm like, you guys, I love you, but you pulled the season out of their ass. You go to Green Bay and you get a block kick and you win that divisional game. And then Trey Lance shatters his leg. You got to go back to Garoppolo. And I'm like, oh, here we go. Mm-hmm. But then you add Christian McCaffrey and Brock Purdy. And it's just like, you go from pulling it out of your ass and maybe this isn't going to work anymore to now we're set up for the next 4 or 5 years. It's insane. It's insane how Teflon this organization has been, which I agree with you. I think it's a mixture of good coaching, good evaluation, and a whole lot of dumbass luck.
A lot of rabbit's foots.
It's nuts, man. So I think this year we'll probably see some regression. It's going to be a very interesting season to me to see if they can continue with this level after playing 60 games the last 3 years. Mm-hmm. Stay healthy, not regress, continue to do that, and then what's the next window going to look like? But yeah, dude, holy shit, this team's fun, man.
It's a content machine, baby.
Unbelievable. All right, we got to get out of here. Thanks for watching. If you watch us on YouTube, and if you are and you haven't, please subscribe. And if you're listening to this on our podcast, please subscribe to our podcast and to YouTube as well. Subscribe to both. You got options. You can watch us.
That's right.
To us. You could listen to us while watching us. Like if you're doing something in your house and you feel like, hey, I want to look at Al and Brian on the television, you could do that too. That would be cool as well. So,
and we'll be back later this week, hopefully with a guest. If not, you get to see our lovely faces again. But like we said, this team is a content machine, and there will be more to talk about. Until then, for Al, I'm Brian. Later.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Hey!
2400 Sports is an Odyssey company.